This story came to mind when I heard that I had the good fortune to talk to you. Stanley Clarke was talking about once upon a time how he ended up playing the bass. He said in his school he was the last to the music room in choosing instruments, and he ended up playing the acoustic bass. And, well, he eventually thought it was a good match because he's a pretty big kid. Were you the last to the music room? Or what happened in your case? Why did you choose the bass?
My story is slightly different from Stanley Clarke. First of all, I love Stanley Clarke. He is one of my favorite bass players on both acoustic and electric.
Mm-hmm.
Well, when I started on violin. So it was a situation where I had the choice of either starting on saxophone or violin. All the saxophones were gone. So that's how I began. I actually loved playing. But in high school, I decided to pick up the bass one day on my own, and I played Mozart Symphony number 25 by ear, just because I heard it on a recording. And my bass teacher, Mr. Miller, my orchestral conductor, he heard me playing it, and he said, "Oh, Endea, you play the bass now. Well, you're going to have to switch from violin to bass." And I said, "No." And he said, "Well, play the bass or get an F." I said, "Oh, my gosh." Here we go. I guess I'm playing the bass now. So he always said that I would thank him later. I guess he knew what he heard.
Wow, what formidable gifts you have. That's incredible that you can pick up Mozart by ear like that. The stuff that you play, it sounds like it's influenced by, just in your recordings anyway, everything from gospel to Little Richard and even the Brecker brothers. There's a lot of syncopated stuff going on. What did you listen to growing up?
Well, you're right. I listened to a lot of gospel. I grew up as a church kid, so that means going to church at least 4 times per week.
Mm-hmm.
Heavily involved in it, heavily listening to all the Winans and Clark sisters and Hawkins family recordings. A lot of Motown since I am from Detroit. Also, ironically, a lot of salsa because that came on the Detroit radio. Every genre of music actually was on the Detroit radio at that time. So I heard jazz and I heard smooth jazz as well. I heard classical music. I heard everything. I heard alternative rock. I knew the Little Richard songs. I'm a huge fan of Little Richard, even to the point of reading his life story.
Wow.
So, yeah, it's so many influences, and I'm so blessed to grow up in a city like Detroit, especially during that time, because Detroit never boxed the person in musically as far as the radio was concerned. So I always had a clear view of how everything is connected.
And I think of you going down the road of playing the bass specifically, and it's an interesting choice for a female. And you've broken down a lot of barriers, contemporary barriers. Have you had to face some barriers in taking the stage, playing the bass? Think of artists like Dorothy Ashby, for example. Now, she was playing the harp, which is kind of challenging in jazz to begin with. Have things changed a little bit? Is there a little more acceptance?
Well, quick answer, no.
Okay.
It's actually pretty interesting. Back home in Detroit, my first 2 mentors were Marcus Belgrave, the great trumpet player, and Rodney Whitaker, my first ever bass teacher.
Mm-hmm.
When they taught me, and when we were taught in group sessions, they never made me feel like, oh, I was just the girl musician or the female musician in the band. Actually, they taught everybody equally and treated everybody equally. So that means, okay, if they're tough on the boys, they're also going to be tough on me. If they're pushing people to get to the next level and not being soft on them, they're also going to make sure that I'm reaching my full potential. Also, if someone might be getting told off because they're slacking, I'm also getting told off.
Okay, so it's an equal playing field.
Yeah, it's just an equal playing field on all ends. So it wasn't really until I got out of that safety zone, got out of college and moved to New York, that's when I really felt it the most. Just the disrespect on gigs, the disrespect as a woman, my ethnicity, my race. Yes,
Mm.
that is a thing too. I found myself having to defend myself at gigs and to come out of my Zen zone. And that also brings a person out of the music. Like you came there to do a job, and now you have to focus even more because you have to deflect all this mess going on. But like I say to people a lot of times, whatever lane you're in, when you feel like you're being minimized or your voice is being diminished, you create your own. So that's why I started my own band. That's the whole reason why I started the Cookout, because I felt like I was being so disrespected to a point where I just said I had to envision like music and a musical environment that is inclusive and equal, and that has to be a thing. And the only way that I can see that right now is if I create my own band. Now, when I started with JaZZYC's at the Late Show,
Hmm.
that was one of the first times, significant first times, besides playing with Winton and like maybe some other Harlem musicians, that I really felt equal on the bandstand. Like, oh, this person really hired me for the music. I'm not being disrespected. This is awesome. The disrespect is always a thing, especially as a band leader now. I'm seeing a different aspect of it. It's
Yeah.
more subtle,
Uh-huh.
but I don't know. I never quit, and I bend but I don't break. Hopefully there'll be a time where we don't have to talk about being a male musician versus being a woman musician versus being a non-binary musician.
Right.
We can just focus on the integrity of the music. But until that happens, I guess here we are.
Well, you're bringing some great tunes too, Alberta. We're looking forward to that. I'll let you go momentarily, but what's on your turntable these days? What are you listening to?
Wow, that's a great question. Oh my gosh, what am I listening to? It was so interesting you brought up Dorothy Ashby, because I was listening to another harpist, unsung hero, I believe, Alice Coltrane. So I've been diving into her songs, also her work with Pharoah Sanders. So I've been listening to a lot of her. I was asked to give my favorite Chick Corea tune. So I've been listening to a ton of Chick Corea again, a lot of Donny Hathaway, a lot of Rolls Royce, the early funk bands.
Yeah.
And trying to keep my ear to everything. Like if I hear a new record out, like on the mainstream side of things, Janelle Monáe, her album is amazing. So I'm just trying to grab different influences and just journey in different directions.
So
Yeah.
I'm sure we'll hear all of those influences and more when you step on the stage with the Cookout. We're looking forward to that. Endea, thank you. But I do appreciate you taking the time to pull your hands away from the bass for a few minutes and chat with us.
Oh, thank you so much.